internet is so unhinged. There's a video of someone cutting into, what's the stuff called? Like Fimo clay, the stuff.
Oh, just like artist clay?
Yeah,
kinda?
just artist clay. So someone jokingly put on their reel, let's make earrings with cheese. It's very clearly not cheese. If that is cheese, that is ill. That is, you need to throw that cheese away. It is not the right color. And they're just cutting it up. They're making earrings with the cheese, and they're calling it cheese. And the first comment is someone saying, that's beautiful, but I'm so sad for the cows that get raped multiple times and get babies taken away from her. I don't want to attack your art, but can we not forget the suffering that they have gone through?
Jesus.
And then the creator's like, it's polymer clay. And then the person said, oh, now I see. Sorry for that. My bad. The message is still very true and important to spread. And I would like to present a counterpoint that maybe it's not. Maybe we don't. Maybe this culture of saying completely unhinged things like that on an innocent video, maybe we don't need to do that anymore. Can you imagine if someone did that like in real life?
Yeah. Well, it happens in real life. I mean, that's like the vegan mentality, right?
Were you like that? Were you just an absolute buzzkill?
No, I think I was very aware of the stigma that came with it as I took it on. And I knew that was, if I even said that I was vegan, I was going to get pinned as that. So I was always trying to not be as least invasive as possible and like not judgmental. But the deeper I got into it, there were times that
I mean, I've seen some of your older posts.
Yeah.
You were pretty intense.
And it's interesting because there's like, I felt a lot of like, I wanted to I felt convicted by it, for my own life. And it is hard. Like when you're in that mentality, the change only comes from like everybody aligning to it. So it does feel like you're always a victim of life and you're trying to advocate for the innocence of the animals. And so you end up becoming somewhat like preachy.
Yeah. It's really hard to be into something without becoming an evangelist about it.
But what's crazy is that when I look back, a lot of that is it's kind of just about me. Like when I'm arguing with those people, like in that post, it's like the person is trying to draw attention to themselves to say like, I'm super sensitive and I'm aware of these things. You're not. So let me educate you, which is about just kind of lofting yourself up above others and some kind of moral superiority.
Yeah.
And I realized that was not my intention in the beginning, but as I got kind of deeper into that was the mode that I was seeing myself as like, well, I'm disciplined to this because I care about these animals and I'm, putting that above my taste buds, just wanting to eat, things that I enjoy. And so you guys should do this too. And so it made me feel like slightly like superior. And that's when it becomes preachy, when I'm like, we're at a steak dinner and I'm having salad and everybody's having steak. And then they ask, why aren't you? And then I just say, oh, I'm vegan.
Because of cow rape.
Yeah. And then I'm like, I don't know if you know this, but that meat's on your plate, it did come from a lot of suffering. It's like, it's cringy when I think back about it. Because I was like convicted and it was real for me, but it becomes pretty quickly this platform to, make yourself feel morally superior. And in the end, I still agree with I don't like the factory farming aspect of anything. But I find it to be far more, it's like it's just different for everybody. And, being vegan was like, it was actually hard to just watch any suffering in the natural world. And the more I learned about consciousness and just in general, like the fractal element of nature, how powerful it is, like it involves certain aspects of death and suffering to kind of feed the system. Like there are natural predators in the wild that like, eat other animals, and it's a painful act of like suffering, but in the grand scheme of things, there's this like really beautiful balance to it. And so I think in general, like a lot of the veganism that I was caught up in, it was a fear of death. It was a fear of pain and suffering and wanting to eradicate it completely. And I realized that's like a insolvable thing. It's not. It's something to be embraced, and there's a beauty to it. And the more I can, not partake in the parts that I don't think are needed, like the factory farming, this mass amount of food we're needing to get to people does involve some kind of, it's like the systems are degraded and not good. But in general, when I became more comfortable with the idea of death in general, that was like, that relieved me of a lot of the suffering that I couldn't deal with in my own eating of food. It made me kind of balance out in a general sense, I think.
I think you should do whatever makes sense to you, and you should operate in a way that aligns with your own personal moral compass. My posts from like back in like 2012 or 2013, where I had just discovered like the corruption in agriculture, and I just found out that processed food was not good for us or whatever. And my posts for like 2 straight years are so fucking sanctimonious. It's like so cringy. And I'm posting pictures of like every time I go grocery shop, I'm like posting pictures of what I got. And for me at the time, it was like I was a server, my husband was a construction worker. So it was not easy to be able to afford buying all organic food. I was very proud of that. But then every meal, just like, okay, so I made organic chili with organic beans and organic sauce. Like I would say organic before every word.
Yeah, it does become like really tiresome to do the external like validation of things. It's just like, why
do we have to shove things down? What is the compulsion to shove things down? Why couldn't I just enjoy eating clean, quote unquote, eating clean? Why did I need to proselytize
and tell everybody? Yeah.
Why? And then I literally, for a long time, had a hard time letting people eat whatever they want without feeling the need to be like,
to educate.
That's killing you. You know, it is a challenge. As much as I am like live and let live, it is a challenge when I feel like I've discovered a new piece of information to not preach that. But then I'm always just like so icked out when I look at myself a couple years ago and I'm like, oh, I was on that kick, especially when it's got some moral bent. It's so embarrassing. And like, why do we, and I think this is like consensus programming, why do we feel like everyone has to be on the same page in order for our experience to be valid?
That's what it's like a sickness. We're all in that tribal, like we need to homogenize everybody for whatever we're doing to be okay. Where it feels like you have like an insight into the reality that other people don't have. You have to change everybody for it to actually occur.
And I think we talked about it on this podcast. It might have been a Patreon, but the Venn diagram of like communities that believe they are persecuted and also communities that are highly evangelical. So like Christians believe that people just have it out for Christians, but if Christians just minded their fucking business and didn't try to legislate their belief systems on people who don't even have those belief systems, nobody would give a shit. It's like so much of the wrath against Christians is that religion has had a fucking chokehold on our culture for so long. And if you don't like abortion, don't get abortion. I just don't understand. You don't like you don't want to be trans, don't be trans. Like, I just don't understand why you're up in everyone else's fucking shit. And you think you're protecting a way of life. It's like, then just live the way of life. Nobody's taking it away from you by doing their own thing. But then on the other side, people are also like, vegans are historically, and I've been vegan, I get it, but like, and I was absolutely evangelical about it. The wrath is about the evangelical aspects of it more than like, like nobody gives a shit what you eat. But when you're having a side dish of sanctimony with your meal, like people get defensive about that. So then they're going to start to get in arguments. And now it's the carnivores. The carnivores are really fucking irritating on the internet. And I'm pretty carnivorous. Like that's what my body likes. I think my body would be happy if I just ate steak all day. But my Lord, it doesn't have to be your fucking personality.
I had a lot of respect when I would find out that somebody was vegan and they were just so quiet about it. They were never pushing it on people's in their face while eating, and they were just, I would slowly just like figure it out and then be like, wow, you're so mature. You're just living it. You're not needing to tell everybody. And then I'd feel really, insecure and cringy about the way that I was going about it. But there's something that takes you over where you have to, it feels like you have to get everybody to get on the same page and be as morally, aligned as you are, that like takes you over.
It's gotta be insecurity, right? We're just like insecure. Can I read some of your old Facebook posts?
Oh God, no. I thought I deleted all those from my...
I don't think you did. And you haven't posted in 5 years, so I think they're right here.
Oh God, I gotta go delete those. Yeah, let's not.
Really? You don't want me to?
No, it's fine.
I have to scroll through 5 years of happy birthdays.
I had some cringy ones on Instagram I just deleted a while ago because I was like, I can't accept this about myself.
Oh, you have some good ones here about things. But I'm trying to find, you maybe deleted it. But I think you predicted that by today.
Yeah, that was the one I had on Instagram where I was like, I promise you in 10 years, we're all going to be not eating meat and we're going to all look back and realize how awful we all were for eating animals.
Yeah, you were really active on social media at one point.
Yeah, I feel like when you had like when I was successful and I had a platform, it was like my responsibility to speak about things that I cared about because it felt like it could have an effect on a large group of people and I could change people, for the positive.
That's also a very cringy, the very short period of time where I felt that responsibility as someone who has a platform to talk about anything. Not my best work. It's not very...
There's like a total difference between like having to tell, like your main motive is to tell everybody and use your platform as opposed to just being it. And almost it's like more powerful to, if you do want to affect other people, to just live the way that you believe. And that subtly, like people get curious about it and they ask questions. It's more of it's like a better way a more balanced way to actually have an effect than it is very preachy. And it feels like, oh, because I have a platform, I know best and I know what you guys need to do to change your life and find happiness. When this is like, who knows how you got your platform anyways? Is this lucky or I got my platform because I was an artist. It has nothing to do with like
doesn't mean I have great fucking takes.
Yeah.
So it was like I got quote unquote got a platform that like grew right before 2020. And then there was all this pressure to like speak out. You should be speaking out. And I'm very impressionable to ideas that I haven't had time to sit with yet. And I really hadn't had time to sit with that idea because that kind of hit this like massive pressure at the same time I had just gotten a platform. I mean, it had a small... Mormon and the Meth Head had moderate success, but Soberish then like took off. It was way a lot of people. And then the pandemic hit and I was like chronically online. And then all of this pressure to like speak out and have a take about all of these things. And it's like, now I understand, first of all, I am not someone who has an immediate opinion for public consumption about anything because I am a one line in human design, which I think we're going to get into on the next episode. And one of the most liberating things I was ever told was Kelsey Rose Tort was like, as a one line, you don't feel safe until you have a foundation that comes from investigating. And I don't feel safe until I've investigated all perspectives. Like I can't just listen to one side of something and then think I understand it.
Yeah.
That makes me feel like actually unhinged. But I am also, or have been, I think this is different now, but extremely susceptible to the idea that I am bad or that I am, uncaring or, whatever, all the ideas that were floating around about how some people are just inherently bad because what you look like or how much money you have or whatever. And so I really got sucked into this, like having to have some sort of sanctimonious, preachy perspective and be using my platform for shit like that when it was completely inauthentic to me. And I did do that like preachy, sanctimonious stuff years ago. And I had already like learned that lesson. I had already learned that it was really off-putting when I was like making preachy Facebook posts about big ag. I thought that I was helping people understand how to overthrow the man. And then finally, when I started to get reflections back, I was making people feel like shit who couldn't afford organic food, or I was scaring people into like eating disorders. And I was like, oh, that's like not what I'm trying to do. And I realized that most people are not receptive to having information shoved down their fucking throats.
100%.
And now, after having had a platform and talked into microphones, been talking to microphones for, 6 years now, I also understand that because I speak with an air of authority and I just kind of am naturally a leader type personality, I can, if I get preachy about something, I can get inside people's heads and make them feel weird about being themselves. And so I really had to pull back and was like, oh, the potential to be a cult leader here, which I do not want, is really high. I need to kind of regroup. And after regrouping, it's like the things I'm interested in talking about are validating people's transformational experiences, helping people step into their own individual power and autonomy and whatever. And my political beliefs or my, like these other things, I'm not interested. That's not my department. So I'm not interested in what other people think I should use my platform for. I don't agree with that idea at all anyway. I probably didn't agree with it then, but I was in like fight or flight. And I needed years to sit with that idea to realize that I think it's stupid. But yeah, because I think I'm kind of naturally, the way I talk is already kind of naturally sanctimonious because I like to rant or whatever. I don't know if it's sanctimonious. I like to rant on a topic, but I'm actually, okay with the other side of the perspective. But man, when I'm on a moral high horse, it's so embarrassing. I'm just like not doing that again. Yeah. I'm not interested in ever doing that again. And so, but I love to see people doing it in comments and just watching the just absolute lack of self-awareness. Just don't watch the video of the cheese ear. I mean, I have many more questions about cheese earrings than cow rape, Yeah. I'm like, are those going to rot off your ears? This actually brings me to kind of what I wanted to get into today, which was the not self. We're back to human design. We've done some time traveling aliens, some collapse of modern civilization, some service to self, service to others, and now we're back with human design, talking about the not self. But how much do you know about the not self? Like the actual like human design definition?
Not a huge amount. I mean, I understand it in my own chart really well because I experience it a lot. I mean, I think just in general, it's just the aspect of not, it's acting on most of our conditioning and what we're programmed to believe about how we're supposed to show up, that living just by that is essentially being in your not self, not being aligned with how our energy actually functions, which provides flow and ease. Anything that's doing the opposite of that is you essentially being in your not self, which can create a lot of emotional irregulation, you know?
So this is my understanding of it. If you look at your human design chart, there are parts of it that are filled in. There are the squares and the triangles. Those are called centers. There's some of those that are filled in and have a color. And then all those lines connecting them are called, if it's half of it, it's a gate. If it's an entire one, it's a channel. All that stuff is defined. All of those things have a specific kind of energy. And if you filled in every single part of it, then that would encompass the entirety of the human experience. So each person has something filled, like some channels filled, some gates filled, some centers filled. I think like reflectors don't have any centers filled, I think is what it is. And then what centers are filled kind of determines what your quote unquote energy type is, right? So projectors never have a defined sacral. Generators and manifesting generators always have a defined sacral. So your defined centers are who you are and who you authentically are. And if you only listen to I might be butchering this. This is my impression of it. If you only listen to the energies that are defined in you and you move with that energy, then you are being yourself. However, when you get around someone who has different channels and different gates and different centers than you are, because we are energetic beings, you are being conditioned by that. And I believe that also includes things you're picking up off the internet, things that society as a whole believes. And then also when we're talking about that 2027 shift of the background frequency, that background frequency defines some of those channels and centers for you. And so the language I like to use is you're like kind of possessed by that energy. So the not self is when you are allowing yourself to be possessed to your detriment, I think, I would say, by energy that is not yours. So the easiest example for that is you, a projector with a non-defined sacral. So the sacral is that battery, right? That energy that I have. You being in the same house as me, a person who has a sacral. So you get conditioned by that sacral, which is something that can be addicting, it seems, for projectors, because when you're in my energy, you get kind of high off of that.
Yeah, I get the illusion that I have energy actually when
Right.
I might be tired.
Now, I believe that there are positives to this. Like we get to learn from other people's energy. There is a thing where like I have the 55th gate, you have the 39th gate, which we then complete a circuit, we complete a channel. And so then we together experience the entirety of that channel. But also, you know, that 39th is provokes my 55th emotional ups and downs, you know. But that 55th is something that's about to be in the background frequency. So everyone's going to be experiencing that 55th. So I have here like a list of some of the undefined, we're obviously not going to get into the gates and channels, but the undefined centers. So these are the shapes. So the very top one on the top of your head is called the head center. So if that's open and doesn't have any color there, the conditioning theme is pressure to answer questions or resolve doubts that don't belong to you. And the not self behavior is constantly seeking mental certainty or overthinking, trying to solve problems that aren't relevant to your life. We both have that open. Have you experienced that?
Yes. Yeah, and it always feels like it is an unsolvable problem, actually. Like I feel like the attempt is to try to solve it. But
you think a lot of your seeking had this in it for a while, right?
Yeah, with the desire to like get the final answer and be relieved of it, and it never really happens. It never comes. I would find myself getting, relatively bitter or frustrated about some of those unsolvable aspects, as opposed to then, not feeling the need to solve a lot of existential problems, but like relax into them and let myself flow in an easier way that like understands those concepts. It doesn't like solve them, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah.
Then it is good. It doesn't make me bitter. It doesn't make me frustrated with so I feel like it's like, becoming aware of all these little aspects is helpful when it takes over, and there is like some kind of conditioning, whether that's coming from culture or from being around people that would have a defined one and can actually get some kind of satiation from doing that. Then I would take that on and feel like I could do it too. But
yeah, so I would say probably if someone has a defined head center, I'm not an expert on this, I haven't spent a lot of time on this, but if they have a defined head center, they would probably just be able to answer questions or resolve doubts, or they would feel like not at all concerned with that.
Right.
And another thing about how conditioning shows up is we often project that onto other people. And so when I first met you, you were like 3 years. We first met, you were like 3 years into waking up. And you were experiencing an enormous amount of pressure externally from the people around you, not to tell your story, but to just give you a bouncing off space, to hurry up and finish your seeking journey.
Right.
Like, do you remember that? When I first met you, you were like making promises to people that it won't always be this way.
I just need another year and I'll solve all my issues.
And then you still were kind of like that for a little bit. And then I don't remember it might have actually just been recently that you're like, oh, you're just constantly becoming. You never get there.
Yeah.
There's never a place to get. But it's funny when we have like conditioning, it's often we experience it as other people putting that pressure on us. And it might be other people putting that pressure on us because reality is a reflection. The next one is the open Ajna. And this is, I think, the one that bites me in the ass a lot. Conditioning theme, pressure to be mentally certain or hold on to fixed opinions, not self-behavior, trying to present yourself as certain or knowledgeable when you're unsure, feeling uncomfortable with not knowing something. I get
the
very...
Ajna I have defined, right?
No.
Or I don't have it defined?
We have both of those open.
I'll pull up my chart just to make sure.
I think I've seen this in you in for a long time, not feeling comfortable. This shows up sometimes for people like, oh, I can't talk about healing because I'm not finished healing.
Right.
I can't share my experience because I'm not finished learning. For me, I believe the open Ajna is where I end up picking up ideas from the internet. I'll go on a deep dive, just kind of observing, and then I kind of take on that person's perspective. And I think this is the positive thing about the open head and open Ajna is you can take on other perspectives. Like you're currently completely immersed in the perspective of the Waves books, and then eventually you process through it. But I get very conditioned by ideas I see on the internet, so I can get kind of swept up in some social contagions for a minute while I sort through it. But I definitely saw that pressure to know or that pressure to be certain with early talking into microphones. I felt like I had to have an answer for everything. And when the world started falling apart, I remember feeling an immense pressure to know what was going to happen next, to have an answer. And then that same thing with that pressure to have an opinion on whatever's happening in the world, to have an opinion about something I didn't know about 5 minutes ago. Where now I'm very comfortable. It took me a long time to figure out how to say it, but now I'm very comfortable just being like, hey, I changed my mind. That's my whole thing. So
so the biggest aspect is to be able to it's not a final, you take on other people's ideas, but then that doesn't need to be a secure thing that never changes. It's being open to the changing aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what I feel like when I'm taking on, I definitely feel that when I get into a rabbit hole, I like take on this person, whoever book I'm reading, I take on the whole thing as my centering compass of reality. Now I'm looking at it through like the Wave series. And then it's actually kind of alarming to be in that state for a while, because I feel like I resonate with it, but I don't have all the information to like, if I needed to speak on it for 2 hours at a conference or something, it would stress me out because I don't exactly know it. But then once I move out of that and kind of get back into my own life or get into something else, there are little bits that stick with me, but overall I change into I absorb it into a different way of being. That's not like, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's not, there's just certain aspects that stick with it, and I drop the majority of like the whole perspective.
So that's exactly what I'm talking about. For me, it's more kind of social movement stuff. I'm much more interested in like, I don't know, like sociology, but not like academic sociology. Like I'm more interested in what people are doing. And so I'll spend time on the internet and I'll end up in some corner of the internet of people who are really passionate about this thing. And then I'll kind of take on their belief system for a while. And then I'll spend time, or when there's just something that everyone's, talking about, that everyone's passionate about on the internet, I'm more likely to like take that on and kind of hold that same perspective for a while. And then it takes me a while to sit with it and to find the parts that don't feel good, and then to find the way that it's like pinging off of my guilt or shame or whatever, and kind of work through it. And then at the end, I'm like, I like this thing that you're saying. I don't like any of the stuff around it. I don't like the victim consciousness. I like the nuance here. And so you do that more with like concepts or, like things that are less connected to.
And I feel like what has actually caused on both of our sides, like a frustration or bitterness, is that when you've taken on one of those social concepts, and then everything that is happening in life is running through that filter, and being criticized from a perspective that isn't quite yours, but you understand. And then I will get frustrated with like, you've turned into this, all of a sudden, this like person that's judging all these aspects about what we're doing that wasn't there 2 weeks ago.
Right.
And it almost feels irrational. And we'll get in a little bit of like, kerfuffles. What is the word? Kerfuffles. I hate that word. But like little bitty arguments about very like surface level things. And then a month later, it will be grounded into a rationality that's not, that's just a little bit more you. And I mean, the same thing when I get down on some rabbit hole that I everything that's going on in reality runs through that filter, and I find myself trying to push against certain elements of reality that like are futile and actually are not getting anywhere. Until, a month later, then I feel like, I understand what I was trying to do, but I was going about it in like kind of the wrong way. It wasn't really quite me. I was trying to remember certain lines from the idea or from a book and trying to like present those, but just regurgitating them, not giving my like own take on it.
Right.
That then becomes.
It doesn't really bother me, but I know that you've gotten a lot of.
It's frustrating when you're in it because I feel like I understand the concept but I want to be able to like read from a paragraph in whatever's happening in reality to say, here's the point I'm making. But it's not like me. I'm just like copying somebody else's opinion or some kind of facts. Instead of like, once I sit with it, it ingrains the things that are meaningful to me that like I can then present via my own experience and reference, then comes to the surface. And so it does take time. I have to kind of dive in. If I don't identify with that and get frustrated that I'm having to kind of get the ultimate answer, once it sits, it actually becomes kind of a natural part of my growth. but it is like always changing, you know, because then I'll run to a different rabbit hole that will actually contradict some of that stuff.
Right. Yeah, it's the same thing. Like I've gone through, you know, various phases of like social, I guess in the last couple of years, like certain social justice things that were actually just like really kind of running parallel to victim consciousness. And I had to like sort out like what is being empathetic and compassionate to people's experience and what is, you know, really like treading water in victim consciousness. And then I went to a phase where I was consuming a lot of content about spiritual psychosis, which same thing. I think it pinged off, same thing with the social justice stuff. I think it pinged off of like some shame and guilt inside of me. And so I was so afraid of being a bad person that even though there were like alarms going off, going like, some of this is really disempowered. Some of this has no, like there's a matrix trap. Like some of this belief in like us versus them just like will trap you in a victim state. And like, am I promoting this victim consciousness and under the guise of like helping people? Like it took me years to kind of sort that out and be like, okay, this can be your experience that you have had in the past, but if you take it as an identity into the future, you will stay there for the rest of your life. And like, that's what the universal law says about it. And so I can't keep pretending to think that this is a productive way to look at the world, so that you'll think I'm a good person when I'm actually know that it's keeping you in a victim trap. And then the spiritual psychosis or spiritual bypassing were both really interesting because spiritual bypassing, I took on, I got accused of it. I sat with it for a long time. I danced around and avoided talking about things that I understand to be true because I didn't want to be accused of it. And then I eventually landed on like, you are free to look at every single experience you have through many points of awareness. If you choose to jump to the spiritual point of awareness rather than whatever it is other people think you should do with it, like that's your choice. But also people tend to take bypasses when they don't have the space for the other things, you know? And so I realized that that's kind of mostly just a way to judge other people's experience. It's not like super productive as a thing. Most people are materially bypassing, you know, so who cares? And then spiritual psychosis was interesting because a passion of mine is keeping people out of the mental hospital while they're going through their awakening. I mean, I absolutely was dancing with psychosis when I was going through my awakening, but I was in a really safe place to do that because I was on drugs. And everybody's in, you know, I was on meth, so everybody was already in mild psychosis and nobody was afraid of psychosis. And it wasn't unusual for me to be outside talking to people that nobody else could see and whatever. And so something I've always been very passionate about, and a lot of what me talking into microphones has been about, I think I'm moving away from that now, but a lot of what Soberish and especially AOD was about validating people's early awakening experience and keeping them out of the mental hospital. But then I did run into people that I would do sessions with or I get emails from, and I'm like, you actually need to talk to a mental health professional because you are like teetering on the edge of like danger to yourself or others. Yeah. Or this is like beyond, you know, you are in psychosis and projecting this onto spirituality. And so, you know, I have a mental health directory pinned to the top of my free Patreon where you can find awake mental health professionals that can help you sort through it. So it's something I've always been very passionate about. But then there was this movement just in peak me, I don't know, like hating myself or something. I don't know what like 2020 through 2022 was about. But if there was an opportunity to look at myself through the lens of being inherently bad, I took it. If there was anything like you're inherently bad because of this, you're inherently bad because of this, I took every single one of those fucking paths in that probably till 2023. And so, you know, there was someone on TikTok talking about spiritual psychosis and their experience with it. And I'll resist the urge to shit on this person, but like There is a lot of disempowerment in the New Age movement, and I've been saying that. And there's way too much of people getting like initiated into things they're not ready for. There's way too much of people going through very early awakening and then trying to contact higher beings. You know, I think we've already talked about this on here. Like, I know people were awake for a minute and then they were power hungry still. Like, they didn't look at their own shadow of like wanting power and domination. And then they start trying to contact these gods, but their motive is to contact these gods so they can amass more power. And they got their ass handed to them and they went into psychosis, you know, because they weren't grounded and because they had a huge hole in their aura and because their intentions were shit. So they synced up with something whose intentions were shit. And as soon as I started talking to microphones about like the supernatural and consciousness and stuff, I was like freaked out by how much people wanted to go so hard after that stuff. And that's another lesson I learned is like, I want to talk about grounded spirituality, like live your life, be a human being with consciousness also. Like, all the aliens and the whatever. I mean, like, I know I talk about the aliens, but they're actually such a very small part of my life at this point. Anyway, these are all things I learned via having an open ajna and taking in and maybe head. I really don't understand the difference between the two. And taking in a lot of other people's perspectives. But yeah, when I was in the phase of like spiritual bypassing or any of these kind of these social justice things or these like, spiritual psychosis, I was very annoying to be around. And I am sorry for that. Cause I was so afraid, cause it's pinging off of my shame, right? So I was so afraid of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing or being bad or spiritually bypassing or making other people go into spiritual psychosis. And this was also like perimenopause anxiety had hit and I hadn't addressed it yet. And so I was also anxious for the first time in my life. And so all these things kind of converged to make me someone who like really was not fun to do a podcast with because I would be like, well, don't say that. Don't say. Well,
dude,
no,
that's why we didn't do this podcast for so many years. Every time we'd try, I'd say the wrong color or something. And she'd look at me and be like wide eyed and then get really awkward. I feel like I had a like gag on. I couldn't like be me. It was so hard.
I did your nervous system work. What can I say? All right. Throat center. We both have this defined, so we don't have this conditioning. Throat center, if your throat center is opened, you've got a conditioning theme of pressure to attract attention or speak in order to be recognized. And the not self behavior is speaking excessively or trying to say the right thing to be noticed without being grounded in your true nature.
See, but I feel like I definitely deal with that as far as the projector aspect with like speaking when I'm not invited.
Yeah. So there's also,
but I mean, I guess that's just conditioning it's a different aspect. It's not necessarily because it's defined or not.
This
defined.
is just like specifically like conditioning in centers.
In centers. Yeah.
And I think there's something called like the hierarchy of the not self that goes through and shows like what I believe the order in which you'll have this conditioning, but I don't know. I was going to get a reading of that at one point from Kelsey and we forgot. Yeah. So then you also have like not self of the types, which I do have here on a list. So next is heart next is G center. Mine is open. Yours is defined. Mark.
Sorry, they could have come up with a better name than G Center. It's just
every name in human design sucks. I have to say that. The words don't mean what they mean otherwise.
Yeah.
Like the amount of people who are like, I'm a manifester. I don't really manifest that good. And I'm like, oh, that's not what it means. Or like, I'm a martyr. I don't feel like I'm a martyr. It's not what it means. G Center, mine's open, yours is closed.
Yeah, it is. Sorry, I don't even know what that means.
I don't either. You have an Audi G Center. Conditioning theme, seeking love, identity, or direction from external sources, not self-behavior, continuously searching for a sense of purpose or place through others, feeling lost without external validation of identity. This is what I think makes me more susceptible to, and I'm not always susceptible to it, but I'm susceptible to it if I've not had time, like not been able to spend time with that idea yet. It makes me more susceptible to kind of social contagion, the word I'm looking for, but like when everybody gets swept up on some sort of idea, I'm more likely to get swept up in it than you are, because you have just kind of like a more defined sense of self.
Right.
And you can kind of just quickly assess like, no, this is not my thing. But and I can do that if I've already encountered this idea and I've already processed it, then I'm fine. But if it's kind of a new idea and people are like speaking with an air of authority, I'm a sucker for people speaking with an air of authority for a time.
Is this why you bought a air dryer or a freeze dryer? Because you were convinced that it's a new idea that we should take on, and it.
Yeah.
You were so convicted that we needed this for our Japan trip, and now we're not even.
No,
using
I was just going to use it for the Japan trip. My sacral did not activate on it. No, but I would say I probably have 150 different times gotten swept up in the idea that we are going to need a food storage.
Right.
And whenever I think of a food storage, I go, okay, if we buy a food storage of some sort, I am going to end up sick when we're eating it because I can only eat like 3 foods. And so I'm like, I need to make my own freeze-dried food. Yeah, maybe, but no, it's more like when society is going, you're this because you look like this, or you're this because you have this, or you're this because you know, whatever. I'm more likely to go, oh God, I am that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also have like shame stuff that is very subconscious. Heart and will center, which I believe is also ego. It's also called the ego. So it's that little triangle. We both have that open. The conditioning theme is pressure to prove your worth or value. Not self-behavior is overcommitting or trying to prove yourself in an effort to feel worthy or valued, often at the expense of your well-being. I see this in both of us.
Yeah.
Overcommitting big time, right? People-pleasing, I guess, would fit in this one.
Yeah, and it's so not having a willpower. You can't like rely on willpower.
Oh, so that's interesting. I should look into that more. Like, are people who have this defined, does discipline come naturally to them? There's just a podcast where we ask you, the listeners, to explain human design to us. Full disclosure, we decided we wanted to talk about the not self because we feel like we have experienced a lot of it, but we are just now finding out how the not self works. We're finding out live with you.
Well, and it's like I feel like I understand the real basic parts of for each human design profile, like the
bitterness for you.
Like bitterness for projector. Like I definitely have like worked with that and tried to practice like getting it to not occur so often, and why is it occurring, and how are all the different aspects of it showing up, like how to stop those or prevent them. And so like I've spent a lot of time in my not self,
right?
But that the way to get out of it was strictly like for projectors that it's helpful. So like, and then understanding, I mean, I know the other ones as well for the other designs, but I wasn't aware of all the how in depth you can get into the centers and the gates, the ones that are open, that's where you can, there's more specific parts of being in your not self that to be aware of. That's really interesting. It's like there's so much different information to get into.
Human design is like endlessly deep, because then it's even got something like the hanging gates. And so when you have gates that don't make a channel, that has some sort of energy. All right, the next one is huge for both of us, like maybe the hugest of the not self for us that we've been working through for years, and that is the open solar plexus. So this is like the triangle on the what side? The bottom right? Whatever. It's one of the triangles on the bottom. So this is emotional. So people who have this defined are called like emotional authority. People who have this open are open solar plexus.
Oh, this is brutal. So we're like fucked up by other people's emotional states, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they are feeling their own emotions. We're feeling their emotions, I think.
Yeah.
But the conditioning theme is pressure to avoid emotional confrontation or conflict.
Yeah.
This is where the desire to avoid conflict comes from. Not self behavior, suppressing emotions to maintain harmony or peace, avoiding confrontation at all cost, which can lead to internalized stress.
Yeah, that's been the fucking battle of my life, is that concept, just avoiding any kind of conflict at all costs.
Yeah. Tell people whatever they want to hear.
Yeah. Sacrificing a lot of my own beliefs, my own feelings on things. And just so I wouldn't, poke the bear and wouldn't create have somebody not like me.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, like, that's not like sustainable. And so I've done so much of that in my life where I just am like saying yes to things I mean no to and going along with things I don't want to do. And even when the people, and you know what is interesting, everyone that I've ever done that to that stands out to me has emotional authority. They have a defined solar plexus. And I would people please them really specifically. So there's something about them having that energy that is like overwhelming or scary to me, where it's maybe easier for them to be in conflict.
Yeah, totally. And so we bend towards their kind of authority of it, or they feel confident in it.
Yeah. So I have done a lot of like bending, wiggling, and then slow ghosting in my life to avoid conflict. I'm not like that now. So that's the other thing about these conditioning is like, I feel like there's an opportunity to understand these things about yourself and then heal them.
Yeah. The first aspect is becoming aware of it. Right.
Right.
So like being aware that that's something I have done in the past that has been a habit. Really. It's like, I almost don't even notice it.
Yeah.
To then start to be aware that that's an open center. This is something that's not necessarily me. The desire to avoid conflict, like I'm missing out on an opportunity to actually be in my energy and be myself and have the right relationships. So, I feel like the hardest part is getting the habit to stop, because that people pleasing thing for me was so automatic that I wouldn't even notice it was occurring. But then I'd feel bitter later, or I'd feel like I'm doing something out of obligation, but I said yes. So like, why can't I get out of this? I really didn't want to, but you said yes, dude, and never being able to stop the habit, until I started to become aware that that's me just avoiding conflict and not being able to say the hard thing. And once I would do it, it actually wasn't that hard and it didn't create conflict. The other person would understand. And it was like starting to learn healthy boundaries that made it so much easier to be myself, not feel bitter, not feel like I'm having to do everything out of obligation. I thought that meant like that I was going to be a bad person.
Right. Yeah. Such a theme in like every episode we record.
Yeah.
It's like trying to be a good person by betraying
Sacrificing yourself.
All right. So Sacral Center, I have defined, you have open. That's the one we were just talking about. But this is so funny. You're getting better at it now. I feel like you're being forced to get better at it, but you were such a busy bee. Such a busy bee. And like, I have a defined sacral. And so I have this like battery and I have access to this energy. I mean, I'm going through perimenopause and have been dealing with some other stuff. So I've been more lethargic than I've ever been in my life. But even in the peak energy portions of my life, I always would like have energy in bursts and then was pretty good at like resting or just like laying around, looking at my phone, whatever, without a ton of judgment. And I've never met anyone who can't sit still, besides my dad, also a projector, who cannot fucking sit still. And if you are sitting still, you're like ruminating about the fact that you're not doing anything, which like burns energy. Like judging yourself burns energy. I have to tell people this on sessions all the time. Rest when you're resting. You can rest, read a book, you can rest, play video game, like stuff like that. But like grinding on how you're not doing enough, wallowing in shame and guilt and like that's pressure, like that's burning up your batteries. So you're not even really resting. And you used to do that a lot. That's only recently changed, I would say, in the last year as well, right?
Yeah.
Sacral Center, if it's open, the conditioning theme is pressure to be constantly doing or producing. The not self behavior is overworking or not knowing when to stop. The not knowing when to stop is very funny with you, as you don't have a consistent access to life force energy and feel the need to keep up with others. But then I've also seen you not be able to stop when you're really enjoying something. And if I'm really enjoying something, I don't have to stop. Like I can just keep going and my body will keep making energy. And the thing that's most fascinating to me about projectors is it doesn't matter if you love what you're doing, you still have to rest.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
So you made a record last year, Safe. It's available on all platforms. And you ended up bedridden for a month afterwards.
I got like a nerve impingement. I mean, I got like thrown to the fucking trash pile. I couldn't do anything.
Yeah. And then you didn't sleep for a month, and then you got sick. On top of that, you end up having to go get NAD to come back to life.
And I think those are the effects that can happen when you really like push, and you just think kind of using the mind and the passion about like the thing, wanting to get that reward, but not listening to your body. Like eventually it all comes crashing down. I think the other aspect, it's like harder to discern when I'm by myself, like when to stop, because I can kind of go on fumes for a while. I've gotten better now where I just know that there's like a certain timing of it that my focus becomes a little bit foggy. I can always push through it but I've gotten better where I can just sense that it's like, okay, I should just take a break, go chill for the rest of the day, or even just take a couple hours and really like do something that doesn't involve any kind of external physical energy or just mental. And then I can kind of come back fresh. But I think being around other sacral beings, that's where the illusion comes in, because there seems to be a source of energy, but it's not mine.
Yeah.
And then I can operate for a while, but then once it comes to time to separate and kind of not be doing that thing, then it's like all of a sudden some drug has worn off and I'm hungover and I'm like brain fog, immense fatigue, as if somebody just like, gave me some kind of sleeping pill or something. That's what's harder to discern, like when you're with somebody and there's an excitement and like it seems like you have energy to still be going. Realizing that that's not yours is hard because it just feels the same.
Yeah. Well, I just think about the fact that you spent a decade like traveling the world and constantly having to go, and how you could never fucking do that now.
Yeah. And a lot of those times, like on tour, I would feel fine sometimes, but then when I would get by myself, like in the hotel room, oh my God, then I'd crash. Then I'd feel depressed. Then I'd feel all these things. And it was hard to get back out and go get with the group again. But then funny enough, when I would get in the group and then like I would start to feel okay. But I think in general, I mean, I guess I just wish it should be like a requirement for creative acts that are going to be working in groups together. Not a requirement, but it would be so beneficial for everyone that is going to be kind of working together to understand each other's energy types through human design and be able to know how to show up, what kind of expectations you should have for the other person. I think it would have solved so many of the problems that I had being in a creative group together. And I think we all just would have been a little bit more productive and less bitter and frustrated with each other, because I think we were trying to make other people be the way we were, energy wise, subconsciously not knowing that there's like somebody else doesn't show up that way. And that doesn't mean that they're not interested and that they can't deliver something. It's just going to look different. I wouldn't be able to do that today. I would have had to be really advocating for myself and setting boundaries in a way that I think would be hard to understand without some kind of human design knowledge.
Well, that's what I really like about this container is that it starts to, and I'm sure we said this on an episode already, but like it helps us dehomogenize our expectations, or kind of just going back to the beginning of this episode, like why are we programmed to believe that in order for our thing to be valid, everyone has to be on the same page? Like, why do we struggle so much with respecting the way that other people move through the world? And we are, in capitalism and Western civilization, we are not at all presented with the reality that people are different and they have a different level of energy and they have different capacity and they have different capabilities. I was in a conversation with someone recently who still kind of subscribes to this idea that like nobody should get a free ride, if some of us have to work. And I was like, I enjoy working. I like to work. Like when we're talking about what we're going to do on the flight to Japan, you are bringing a pile of books. I'm bringing our taxes and some podcasts to edit and whatever. Like I enjoy working to pass the time. I have to like the work, or I prefer to like the work. But if you get rid of the concept of capitalism, I will still probably work because I like it. I don't like exploiting my labor for money, but I enjoy working. I'm different. Everyone doesn't need to do that. Like, what if we just let people show up as their energy? And so what I like about human design is that it's shifting our perception or our categories of reason towards differentiation. But all that said, something I've really noticed in the deconditioning journey is once you decondition something, you cannot go back. So, it's the same thing with like, as I stopped eating foods that I was slightly sensitive to, I'm now extremely sensitive to them. There was a point where I could get away with every once in a while eating like fried chicken, but now it's been so long since I had gluten that my body will not tolerate a bite of fried chicken. And similarly, there were lots of things I used to be able to force myself to do that I no longer could force myself to do. So like you used to be conditioned enough that conditioning would get you through.
Yeah.
And then you did experience like full burnout, but you can never go back now because you've deconditioned those things. And so you can't go back to making yourself do things. And likewise, I hope that means that we will never regress to avoiding confrontation through lying and omitting and, people pleasing and bending to what other people want. This one's really interesting. Spleen Center, which is your authority. You're a splenic projector, and mine is defined as well. So for people for whom it's open, the conditioning theme is clinging to things, including relationships, jobs, etc., out of fear of letting go. So that's interesting because there's something that you and I do not have at all.
Right.
We are both like, okay, time to let this go. All right. I mean, I guess you enjoy holding on to, and you have a hard time letting go of things and environments. Not that you don't do it, but just because you personify them. Guilt. Not self-behave, but neither one of us cling to things because we're afraid of change.
Yeah, once it's like dead and done, it's very easy to let go and move on and not be attached unhealthily. No.
Yeah.
I think I've sometimes actually get people say I'm not compassionate because I move on so quickly, when it doesn't have anything to do with me not feeling the loss or the compassion, the closure of it. Like I deeply feel those things, but I'm not irrational about like hanging on to something that's not working anymore. It's very easy to just see that this is done And we
it's
need
very clear to me,
process.
that this is like a fantasy.
Yeah.
Like it was good, it's not now. It was working, it's not now.
I think that's what a lot of people in society think, like compassion looks like being overly attached and like trying to save something that is like obviously dying. Like that's having compassion, when it's like, no, I see that it doesn't work anymore. It's a dead timeline, and like, I think that's also compassion, is like seeing it for what it is and let's move on, let's like let ourselves go our own way,
Yeah.
But it's funny how that's like seen as being disrespectful or selfish or something.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I think of like, when I think of spleen, it's like intuition and instinct. It's just that like knowing. It's interesting that people who don't have that have a hard time letting go of things. Like I call it like my ability to, I don't experience a lot of tower moments, meaning like breakups, losses, whatever, outside of people dying, because you can't control that. But things like that tend to not sneak up on me, like getting fired or whatever. Like I'm well aware of like the fat lady singing. Like I'm well aware of the shift in energy, because I sense that stuff when it's coming. So I don't have a lot of tower moments, because tower moments, I believe, happen as a result of holding on to something past when you're supposed to let go of it. Right. So if you're like clinging to a relationship that hasn't been working for a long time, and then you get blindsided by being dumped, it's less about the person blindsiding you and more about like you ignored the evidence for the last year and a half.
That would make sense that it is, because the spleen is kind of this like animalistic like sense that's very subtle, that you could tell by when you're showing up at work, like, oh, I feel like these people are kind of avoiding me and I might be getting fired here soon. It's like an animalistic sense, like so subtle. But yeah, if you didn't have that, you wouldn't be able to see that was coming, and then completely blindsided.
Yeah, because you imagine me being blindsided by a breakup with the level to which I am sensitive to a tone shift.
Yeah. I'd have to really fucking sneak up on you. By the way, I've been meaning to have a conversation with you. It's right now.
That's going to make this podcast awkward, but it wouldn't be the first time I did it. Not self-behavior.
You broke up on a podcast before?
Yeah, we broke up and
right.
then kept a podcast for about 9 months.
Yeah.
And talk about holding on to something after it died. Not self-behavior. Holding on to what is no longer healthy or beneficial due to fear of loss or insecurity about survival. Oh, that's right, because the survival instincts are in that, right? In the spleen.
Yeah.
So not having just a natural sense of how to survive, then, okay, so that's interesting. I'm learning more from the ones that I have defined, because I'm able to see like, oh, this is what it's like to have it defined. So we have access to that. People that don't have access to that have a more kind of clingy, grabby relationship with things. Root center, we both have this defined as well. Conditioning theme, pressure to alleviate stress or get things done as quickly as possible. Oh, that's interesting that that's the root. Not self-behavior, rushing through life to eliminate pressure, feeling chronically stressed or driven by external forces rather than your own pace. That's interesting. I don't have a lot to say about that one. I've heard people say stuff before, like open root. This is like open root behavior, but I haven't paid a ton of attention. Okay, and so then real quick, I'm just going to go through a couple of these that aren't ours. So this is the not self theme of like the types. So in human design, each type has a specific not self theme that reflects how they feel and act when living out of alignment with their true design. These behaviors typically arise when individuals ignore their strategy and authority and are influenced by conditioning. Here's a breakdown of the not self behaviors for each type. Manifester, neither of us are manifestors. Not self theme, anger. Description, manifestors experience anger when they face resistance, control, or are not allowed to initiate as they naturally should.
We'll get to it. Never mind.
This happens when they feel restricted or when their actions are blocked. If manifestors fail to inform others before acting, they may meet resistance, leading to frustration and anger. They are meant to initiate and act independently. So when their power to do so is stifled, anger manifests. So I do have aspects of this as a manifesting generator.
That's what I was going to say. So there's like, because I could see how that could show up. Like you're very rarely angry, but there's like a frustration that kind of leads to anger. Like if it isn't, if you haven't really like informed what the calendar is or something, and then I offer like resistance somewhere because I didn't know, and then there's like this frustration that can turn into like an angry kind of like, I'm trying to get this thing done and you're in the fucking way. But it's probably because there was not a really clear informing of it, right?
Yeah. So it's in human design, the manifesting generators, they often just give all the same advice as generators. So it's like your strategy is to respond.
Right.
And everything is, and your not self theme is frustration. But I have found the informing to be a huge, because that's the strategy, I think, of the manifestor is to inform before they initiate something, let people know. I call it like firing a warning shot. And to be honest, I have to inform, and this is without human design. These are just like things I learned in my life. When I want to do something, I've learned I need to inform, and then I respond to people's response.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But when I have not informed, because I move so fast and I make such huge pivots, when I don't inform people, even of pivots that aren't wildly involved in, I do get people being
pumping
weird,
the brakes
or pumping the brakes or trying to stop me.
Yeah.
So I have learned, fire the warning shot, deal with that. But sometimes I fire the warning shot and then decide I don't want to do it. So if you know me well, or you're like on my Patreon, you might notice I'm always talking about plans. So it's like I'm constantly in a state of planning things, and I end up not doing a lot of the things that I'm initially planning, because I then respond to how the plan feels and decide not to do it. But so I don't think anyone takes me seriously now on Patreon when I'm like, next week I'm going to do this. And they're just like, yeah, I hope they know that they're just like, yeah, we'll see it. Another one that's not ours, a reflector, the not self theme. I don't know any reflectors close enough to have a blueprint of this in my head. Sorry. The not self theme, disappointment. Description: reflectors feel disappointment when life or people do not live up to their expectations. They are highly sensitive to their environment and when the people around them. And when things do not align with what they hoped for, they feel a sense of disappointment. Reflectors are designed to sample and reflect their surroundings, so their not self-theme appears when they are in the wrong environment or not allowing themselves time to process decisions. And then the other one that's not us, but we have 2 kids that are this, is generator. Not self-theme, frustration. Generators experience frustration when they are not engaging with work or activities that truly excites them, or they are not responding correctly to life. They thrive when responding to the opportunities that align with their sacral energy, but when they initiate action instead of waiting to respond, they feel stuck or unfulfilled, leading to frustration. Being busy without satisfaction or having energy blocked leads to not self-expression. And then yours, well, we'll do mine because we've already covered it. Manifesting generators, not self-theme is frustration and anger. Okay, I combined it here. Manifesting generators share similar not self behaviors with both manifestors and generators. They experience frustration when they don't follow the correct response process, leading to activities that don't satisfy their sacral energy. They also experience anger when their energy is blocked, and they face resistance when initiating or moving too quickly without proper alignment. Their challenge is to balance their fast-paced nature with waiting to respond. I think you've definitely seen anger and frustration out of me when I'm like feeling the need to pull some triggers.
Yeah.
And you've stood in the way.
Yeah. And sometimes that's because I wasn't quite aware of what was going to happen with whatever triggers you were pulling, or like the plan, like some of those things. I think that's what would make me pump the brakes a little bit. I mean, sometimes it was just a resistance of not wanting to do something, but
sometimes it was to my benefit. It's the frustration and the anger. Anger I don't super identify with, but like I can get like bitchy or like frustrated or feel imprisoned when someone tries to slow me down.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's because that person is pumping my brakes unnecessarily, and other times it's because I'm moving too fast.
Yeah, I would feel like that's in the past. I've consciously tried to slow you down because I feel like it's something I'm involved with that I think we're moving too quick because I sense that there's something else we have to wait for that's going to affect the outcome, or we haven't made a decision on this other thing that this is going to affect. So let's slow down a bit. And that would be frustrating for you because you're trying to get this like shortcut through it. We need to get it going, you know?
Yeah.
But then other times it maybe was more or less because there wasn't a lot of informing, like there wasn't clarity on like what the plan was. That would make me a little bit like obstinate and resistant to it. But yeah.
It's just always my fault.
Yeah, pretty much.
Projector, not self-theme, bitterness. Projectors feel bitterness when they aren't recognized or invited for their wisdom and guidance. If they attempt to force their advice or direction on others without being invited or recognized, they meet resistance, leading to bitterness. Projectors are meant to be guides, but they must wait for recognition and the right invitation to share their insights effectively. When they act without waiting, they often feel overlooked or undervalued.
Yes.
Yes. And I feel like it sounds like for reflectors, and I guess maybe for everyone, but the level of chronic bitterness, like chronic habitual bitterness you were in when we met, that took you like years to untangle. I'm trying to think, does anyone else, like, could a generator get that stuck? I guess, yeah.
Yeah, and like be frustrated all the time when they're just doing something they don't enjoy doing and are responding incorrectly to the opportunity to not do that, you know?
Yeah.
That would be, I think, really painful to just be constantly in this cycle of not feeling valuable as a person because you're not really happy doing what you're doing.
Yeah, well, the thing where like I think we talked about this before, but like when we would do episodes about this on my Patreon, a lot of people would identify with you because they would identify with not having energy, and then they would look it up and see that they're a generator and be like, I don't relate to being a generator. And it's like chronic states of frustrating energy because you're using your sacral to do something you don't want to do will lead you to like
to no energy,
chronic
and
fatigue,
feeling kind of bitter too, you know?
Yeah,
the bitterness is something that was hard for me to kind of figure out where it was coming from. I mean, I do think for me, when it was chronic, it wasn't just from speaking out of turn and not getting invited and being seen as kind of Mr. Know-It-All. That was an aspect of it, but I think some of the other, it was coming from some of these other things we were talking about, like the people pleasing and kind of not having energy and, you know, pushing further than I should, and then not having energy, being frustrated that I couldn't get to an outcome by working hard, showing up every day, you know, things like that, it was oozing out everywhere. But definitely one that made it easy for me to get a hold of pretty quickly was just that idea of really waiting to be invited to share my thoughts about something, and also knowing to not like speak into someone's problems when they really hadn't become vulnerable and asked for my input. Like, you know, it's one thing of getting like an invitation to do things, or to, like with sessions and stuff, it's like an obvious invitation. Like, I'm calling you, I'm booking this to like have your take on things. But in just group settings, and like something that would quickly, it'd be very subtle that like there's a conversation kind of happening back and forth and everybody's talking, that then it's very easy to slip into speaking into somebody else's problems, that it almost feels like there's an invitation because we're all just chatting about it. This person's giving their input on that problem. This other person's doing as well. Okay, well, here's mine. And you just go into it. The end of those kind of interactions, I would just leave feeling like this vulnerability hangover thing. Like I said the wrong thing. People thought I was crazy. I maybe made the person feel bad. I would just be circling around. That would create like a air of bitterness that I'm not the right person, or I overstepped. And so I don't know, it's a subtle thing when you're actually in groups of people to come across like Mr. Know-It-All and have this agenda to try to be sharing certain insights.
Yeah.
That I do think comes from like the other part of the projector that has not felt valued for so long, is just not being seen, not feeling like they have something to offer. And so to fix that, you want to show people that you have something to offer. And so you want to speak when you feel it's right and you have the idea, you see a problem to be solved, and you want to just go show that so they see you. And so you overstep that boundary very easily, because it actually feels like that's going to be the thing that's going to make you finally feel seen and feel valued. But it would like never work that way. I would maybe say something that was true and something that was like of value, but the other person didn't want to hear that, or they didn't understand it necessarily.
Or they took you as like, why are you trying to be my teacher?
Yeah. Why? Oh, you just know Mr. Know-It-All. And they felt bulldozed. So it would actually be the opposite. I wouldn't get actually seen the way I felt to be, until I just really just like shut up and just don't have any agenda. There's no rush. And then when somebody's actually curious about your thoughts, then there's this like natural ease, and I'm not rushing through it and trying to force it to get seen. I'm just going to share what I think. And then it was like a really valuable, good feeling of being seen like that. And then I was like, oh, this is actually easy to do it that way. There's a flow. It's effortless. And I feel more deeply seen when I just wasn't even trying, But it took a long time to get to that. A lot of just endlessly being in my not self, feeling bitter, and watching myself cross that boundary, thinking, oh, this is it. This is fine. I can tell. I know exactly what to say. I'm going to say it compassionately. I'm going to say it softly. I'm not going to poke anything. And then it would never feel right. The person would either not get it, or I would leave and feel like I exposed something of them that they didn't want to see. And,
And then what does bitterness feel like when you're conditioned? Like, I know that now when you feel bitter, to like look inward and see where you're trying to force an invitation. But like back then, what did it feel like? Because it feels like it's other people's problem, right?
Yeah, it's always like they don't understand me. They don't, there's like, it's a problem with the other person is what it feels like. But what do you mean by conditioned?
Like when you're still in your conditioning, like now you're consciously aware of all of this stuff, right? And so, but there was like for a long time, you didn't have this.
Oh, it's just I think I'm just pointing to external people. It felt like it was everybody else's issue.
Yeah.
Like I'm unhappy because these other people they don't see me, they don't understand me, and I see all their problems and they're not fixing their problems. So I'm unhappy because they are that way.
Yeah. And now when you kind of feel that feeling, does it like automatically?
To me, it's just very clear with this like not self-understanding. I'm just kind of like, oh, I'm off somewhere. Something, if I'm feeling, especially if it's like an immense amount of bitterness and I'm like snippy at people, I'm either, first thing I check is like I'm out of energy. I have no fucking ability to rationally think through this. So I need to just go isolate. Or, a number of factors come up that like I realize that I'm somewhere in my not in my proper alignment of energy, so in my not self, that then I mostly just isolate and try to go internal to see where I'm out of alignment. And then I can, whatever, make adjustments. But it's most of the time, it's like, I would say now, it's usually, it's not the invitation thing. It's now I just don't have energy. I shouldn't be socializing, and I need to just be alone. I haven't had enough alone time. That will cause me to be snippy and somewhat bitter. The bitterness only comes from the reflection back of being snippy. And I feel like somebody else is now getting frustrated with me being snippy, that then I get bitter that nobody else is showing up properly. And I was like, oh, it's actually, I'm not showing up properly.
You know, it seems like it's a very isolating energy, you know, or an isolating state. I don't know that I've ever experienced bitterness, so I'm just trying to get an idea. It seems like one of those things, like when I think of like, okay, so like what does bitter food taste like? It feels like something that feels like you're stabbing outwards, but it's actually just like causing you pain.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how else to describe it. It mostly feels like it is coming from the overarching thing is like not feeling accepted and valued, not being seen, and then like feeling critical of situations that like creates this desire to have balance and have this like harmony, but like it's not happening because I'm not seen, and I can't interact in a natural sense. So being misunderstood and constantly like being met with some kind of resistance. The bitterness is because there's a desire for something great. There's a desire for harmonious interaction and ease and flow. And it's not at all to be found. Everything is met with resistance.
Yeah.
But it's primarily because I'm looking at it through a lens that is somewhat off. Like I'm expecting other people to change the way they're being to make my life easier, is where it becomes like it's kind of backwards. And that creates just like a very bitter attitude, I think.
I feel like the feeling that I feel when I'm in that is, you know, when you're like excited to have a deep conversation with someone, but they have a kid and their kid comes up and interrupts, or your kid comes up and interrupts every 5 seconds. And so the conversation never gets to, or that's
exactly how it feels. I mean, I experience that all the time, and it activates that part of me where I'm kind of like, I'm trying to get this thought out that I feel like is really valuable, and I want your attention. And every 5 seconds you're getting interrupted. And so I can't get to the end, which I feel like if I got to the end, I will have offered my assistance or help, and then you also would have seen me, and we're not getting there because this damn kid. And so then I pretty quickly am like, want to disengage and get frustrated and have to go cool off.
Yeah, so that's like the closest I could describe the sensation of my sacral wants to activate on something, and I feel like people are getting in my way or are trying to slow me down. And like we said, that's a lot of times the result of me not informing, or, you know, I think ultimately this comes down to you have to make sure you have the right people in your life.
I mean, that's the biggest thing for projectors. I think it's like that's one of the hardest parts is to get to that, to where you can have the right people around without feeling like you're being seen as selfish or you're being misunderstood by having to get those people out of your life is like a very difficult thing.
Yeah, because you had some people in your life that were like always trying to rush you through things or try to make you be more productive.
Right.
And so that was like, ended up being kind of like waterboardy on your energy. And then you had other people in your life who wanted you to go slower than you naturally go. But I've found that people who try to slow me down or pump my brakes are not compatible for me. People who find my energy to be too fast and I've had a lot of them in my life, and who feel like it's their fucking purpose in life to pump my brakes. They almost all have emotional authority. Like I said before, we're just not a good fit. I need people that can move fast. And, you know, I've had to learn to not make you go along on my ride, but also you're a good fit because you're also pretty oriented around autonomy. So if I express to you, I need to do this because I need to move fast on this, here's how you don't have to be involved or whatever, you'll let me rip. But there are some people that are just like, they don't like the change that comes from me doing my thing. And so, or they had a dog in the fight or whatever. And so people are always just trying to make me go slower. And those people have to be kind of kept at a distance because I will end up in a chronic like frustration state because I'm not getting the satisfaction. Because that's how I know that I'm doing it, right? Is I got the satisfaction. Yeah, I'm not ever getting satisfied because I'm satisfied from moving fast, having 10 logs in the fire, and, you know, like following whatever my special interest in. And for a long time, I had people telling me like, you need to complete things, you need to finish things, you need to see things through. You can't start another project. You can't get educated in another thing. You can't go after another modality. You didn't finish your last modality. And now look, I'm using all of them. Yeah.
I think for Projector not having the right people around, it's because they're actually supposed to be an exchange. So beyond the invitation thing, you have a lot of people that like know that there's something of value to a projector, and that's just because of the aura. And there's a sense of like, so you can get pretty obvious. I mean, for some people, and I've had this at sometimes that they ask questions, so they do this invitation thing, but there's no. It's kind of like vampiric. Like they just want your insight so then they can go use it and go take advantage of the information you're getting, which can also lead to bitterness, but it's more subtle because you're kind of getting the invitation. It feels good to be asked certain questions. But the real exchange is this like vulnerability and like they see you deeply, like how you've just, they're, you know, inspired by the information that you've given, and they're very thankful. And there's like it's a very subtle like exchange that I think that's what becomes dangerous, having the wrong people around, because everybody becomes vampiric, and you get bitter from that, and you lose energy because there's just people taking and going about and doing whatever they want with it. Kind of, there's not like this very subtle seeing of it, like
right.
Like I feel within some of my sessions, they feel so great at the end of them when there is a exchange of like curiosity and questions, and then there is some sort of a like the other person is thankful, and it's not always verbally like this was so amazing, but there's just this kind of like you can feel a wow, I didn't expect that to come from this session, this kind of feeling, and thank you for doing this, and you know, you're seeing me in a way that I didn't know was possible, kind of thing. That when it closes out like that, it's fuel for days. Like to the projector, it feels so good, and it feels so like there's meaning, and I feel seen in a deep way. That sometimes is like surprises me. It's not even anything that I thought that was going to be some wisdom and some deep thing. It's just a connecting, and I like being able to kind of see something in someone that feels very obvious for the projector, but for the other person, it's like something they had no clue that was there. Very simple. It's the exchange of them like recognizing that you saw that. Is what makes the whole thing work. Like so when people are vampiric and they just see a projector as somebody that they can kind of, it's like an encyclopedia or something they can just take from, is what I think can become somewhat dangerous to have those people around, because you just don't have energy. Like you're getting used. You don't have energy.
Right.
When I get the recognition, I have energy from the exchange. I get filled with energy. When I'm off sessions, I feel so great. I feel
Yeah, they're literally like crazy little battery packs for you.
Yeah, and it's not in a way that's like egotistical, like I am smart and I'm a conscious, like awake person.
No.
It's not. It's like very subtle. It just is like I feel valuable. I feel like I have meaning, as opposed to when I'm having these interactions that I'm forcing information down people's throats. I leave that feeling exhausted and like I'm misunderstood and I'm an idiot and all of that.
You're not an idiot.
I do have to pee.
Yeah, well, this is the end of the episode, so
Okay.
Convenient.
My sister just called me.
We're in Japan right now while you're listening to this. We're in Japan, so don't try to call and complain. We'll see you next week.